Hey again, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of productivity in episode 10. I had another question for you around decision making. So, what barriers, if any, exist in getting your decisions made accurately and quickly? Now, you can either work with me or you can internalize and work with yourself and figure out, what are my external barriers like time, resources, skills, expertise? What are my internal barriers? That can include my resistance to certain decisions, my lack of energy, like, oh, I don't feel like it today, I just don't want to. That's very level 1, it's very apathetic. Or your beliefs about your abilities. And then you can also refer back to episode 5 where we talked about barriers to success, because you might start to notice new barriers coming up that you didn't notice before. Or now that you're working on this topic, which you weren't working on in episode 5, you might notice new barriers. So go back to episode 5, check out barriers to success so you can start to look for yourself. This way you don't necessarily need me. You can do this all yourself. Like I always say, all the answers lie within. Make yourself a list at this point in your notebook. In terms of my decision making, what are my external barriers? Do I have a boss that won't let me because he doesn't think it's, or she doesn't think it's as good of an idea? My internal barriers could be, I'm making an assumption, which is one of those 4 internal blocks. I'm assuming because I tried this before, I can't get a good result. It's never going to work, so it's already over before it started. So those are blocks you want to look at for yourself so you can start to coach yourself through this lesson I'm giving you to raise your energy and get those effortless results. So now, again, you can either work with me or you can do this on your own. And you can create a table or you can just write it on separate pages. And what I mean by table is it's a 2-column table. Column number 1 talks about your strategies for external barriers, and column number 2 talks about your strategies for internal barriers. So now that you know what your barriers are, what are you going to do about it? Like if you said, oh, my barrier is that I'm always level 2, I'm always in conflict. You can take it from a level perspective and you can say, all right, how can I be a level 3? The easiest way to move up levels is to move one at a time so that you can start to incorporate and learn those new abilities. And they're not really new because you go through all 7 levels, through the day anyway. So the thing is, tap into, like if you say, oh, I want to feel joy. Well, what if you ever won something in your life? Like, oh, I won the lottery one time and I was so amazed because I thought of all the great things I could do. Or what if you were ever given really bad news and you were told, you know what? There's a pandemic going on and you can never go outside ever again. That might create a lot of level 1 fear and apathy. So when you want to associate with those levels, think of an idea that embodies, okay, what is something that embodies win-win for me? Oh, I go to, play a game online and I win the game, and wherever I go to plays because an ad plays and they win too. That might be annoying because of the ad, but you win and they win. That's a win-win scenario. What does that feel like to know that you're winning and helping somebody else win? So that's just a way to access some of the levels for yourself because you're already going through those emotions through the day. So there's a way to access it. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment, DM me, get on my calendar. We can talk about what those things look like and mean for you specifically so that you know how to identify them. So now we're going to look at something called the impact of unmade decisions. So decisions unmade are blocks to your higher energy. So even though you're not consciously thinking about them, leaving decisions pending in your inner inbox can accumulate catabolic energy and deplete your daily energy. So deciding on a course of action for each unmade decision will free up your energy. So you're kind of there's like a place for everything. So in your notebook, make a list of any unmade decisions which you've accumulated in your inbox. Like if you said, all right, I want to start a business, but I don't know how I'm going to get the money. So that's an unmade decision. So write that down. Don't know how to get money for my new business. At least it's not stuck in your head with all the other things to clutter up the success and productivity you're after. Another question is, how did your energy shift, and or what did you think or feel as you wrote down those unmade decisions? Because when you write those decisions that are unmade down and you release them out onto paper, doesn't mean you're getting rid of them. That just means you're putting them somewhere so they don't stay stuck and clutter. How do you feel now? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel more energy? Do you feel more ability to make decisions? Not necessarily on those things, although you could. And then that'll be some good headway because now that you wrote it out, you might say, oh, I just thought of something because your inner genius is working. More on that soon. Another question is, what are you willing to do to remove the catabolic energy related to unmade decisions? Be as specific as possible. So if you say, okay, I don't know how to get money for my business, that's an unmade decision. It's creating catabolic energy because it's like, oh, I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything. I used to say sometimes the best thing to do when you don't know what to do is to do nothing. But you're actually, in doing it, if it's important, you're thinking about it, you're letting your inner unconscious work on it. And a great exercise I've always taught myself, may or may not work for you, is that you have a subconscious mind, and in your conscious mind, you can say to your subconscious mind, hey, I need an answer to how I'm going to finance my new business. And I need an answer by, and pick a date, and then tell your subconscious by January 31st, 2021, right? Which is right around the corner. But after the 31st, you might say 2022, or you might say the next month or the next week or whatever. So tell your subconscious, hey, go get me that answer. And when you have the answer, bring it to me consciously so I can understand it and I can go get it done. And try it out. If it works for you, awesome. Now you have a better relationship with yourself and getting answers from yourself that you already have. If you don't get the answer directly, you might be referred to someone or somewhere where you'll get the answer, like Google or an expert or whoever. So let's look at SMART decisions. So this is going to be a 7-step productivity process. The steps are idea or decision that you have. The next one is your plan, which we're going to apply SMART goals to so that you can actually get through it and make headway. Third is measure the plan against values and your mission. Before we talked about values, we're going to get more detail. The fourth is identify and eliminate obstacles. Fifth is measure, engage energy, and commit to action. 6 is take action. And 7 is evaluate action or commit to reaction, depending on where your results are. So step number 1. Idea or decision. Throughout your day, you're presented with many situations requiring a decision on which path to take. These decisions range from small to large. Small could be like where to go to lunch. Large could be where should I put my capital resources for the next year to grow my business, or my real estate investing, or whatever you're up to. Like those big things, like where am I going to get my next car, my next yacht, my next plane? Those can be big decisions too, depending on what you're doing. And I was told recently, never buy anything as a business owner or as an entrepreneur until you can write it off, so that write-off creates an asset value for you, or it doesn't create a liability that drains you. It creates something that allows you prosperity in other areas. So the decisions could also be committing to an idea, mission, or course of action. You may be presented with a problem to solve, a relationship to initiate or terminate, or where to commit your personal time during the upcoming week. All these situations require your attention, focus, and energy. To become familiar on how to use above productivity process, identify an idea or decision that requires your attention. You will then take this idea through the productivity process. So what's your idea that you want to be productive on? Write that down. And now list your ultimate goal desired for this. Desired, that was a long way to say desired. List your ultimate goal desired outcome for this idea or decision and include the time frame for your achievement and your ultimate goal. So now we're going to plan that. So we're going to get into the SMART goals, and SMART has a time frame in it. So don't be lazy and not put a time frame, because the time is one of the most important parts of it. And even if you don't achieve your plan, you can always reset your time. Like when we talk about commit and replan, number 7, if you don't hit your goal, what do? Where do you recommit yourself? Where do you plan some more? So step 2 is planning. An effective process for planning next steps and establishing what is to be accomplished as the next milestone is something called the SMART process, SMART. So in energy leadership, this process differs from others in the SMART goals that you'll work on here. And they're actually mini goals, those that focus on your very first step towards action, not the overall goal. And by already knowing your overall goal from step 1, you can focus your energy more on specifics of SMART. So SMART means specific. What's the first thing you're going to do with your plan? So if you say, okay, I'm going to need to find financing for my business. I'm going to make this a SMART goal. What's the first thing I need to do to find financing for my business? The first thing you could do could be go out and start looking on Google and saying, oh, I want to go talk to all these companies about financing my business. But that may not be the first thing. You might need to research and find out who gives money for business, whether they're angel investors, whether they're loan sharks, whether they're people you see on TV, whether they're your family or friends, whether it's your banker, whether it's somebody who's investing in ideas like yours. You want to research based on where you want to get that money, who has that available, what are their terms, what do they offer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing you might want to do is figure out your game plan of how you're going to approach that. M stands for measurable. So I'll give you an example that I give to everybody about measurable. If I'm in the room with you and you're doing your plan, you're doing your SMART goal for your plan, and you're saying, all right, I'm going to start to figure out how I'm going to find people to help me fund my business. If I were a fly on the wall and you were doing this part of the work, figuring that out, what would I see you doing? Would I see you sitting there thinking about what you're doing? Would I see you writing a list? Would I see you going on Google and looking up, ways to finance a business? What would I see you doing? Well, that's how you are going to measure the measurable part, is by seeing yourself do it. And then when you're doing it, you're measuring it because you're seeing yourself do it. The A stands for achievable. And what achievable means, it's a yes or no question. Is this or is this not achievable? If it's a no, then you know that you didn't start in the right place of your S or specific part of SMART, and that you have to go back to the drawing board. So it's not achievable. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go out to the bank today and I'm going to ask them for $1 million. Is that achievable? Well, going out to the bank is, and maybe sitting down with somebody and talking to them is, and maybe somebody giving me $1 million is achievable. Could be. But for most people, maybe it's not. So if it's not achievable, that may not be your first step. Your first step might be, well, what's my credit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where do I get this money? Who might want to loan me this money or invest in me? The R stands for reliable, reasonable, or realistic. I like to think of it as realistic because for me, when you're being real with yourself, you can say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all realistic and 10 being totally realistic, nothing's going to stop me. How realistic is your goal? So if you say, oh, I'm a 10 for sitting down and researching, my SMART goal, and which is to finance my business and finding money for that, I'm a 10. Or you could say, well, I'm a 1 for going out to the bank and asking for $1 million. So if you're anything less than a 7, rethink where you're starting your SMART goal, and if your goal is really that important right now. Make sure you're anywhere between a 7 and a 10. And when you're a 7, look at, well, what does that mean to me to be a 7? That could mean, okay, I'm really interested in doing that. So you're getting passing grades. It's like 70% out of 100 in school. So I'm really interested in doing it, but I'm not going to do it till tomorrow because it's not urgent, but I know I'm going to do it. So when you look at that number, if you're not a 10, if you're anything less than a 10, what does it take to go from the level you're at one level higher? So in this case, from a 7 to an 8. What would an 8 look like? Well, an 8 would look like I'm still just as interested, except that I'm going to do it today. And I'll do it by 2 o'clock instead of right now. A 10 could be, oh, I'm stopping everything, I'm doing it right now. So where are you? What does it take to get you to that next step, like from 7 to 8? What does that look like? And the T stands for time sensitive. When will you complete this goal? And to make time sensitive most effective, you want to have an accountability partner. Now, again, this is where if you had me as your coach, you could say, okay, we're going to do SMART goals, and I'm going to let you know by next week that I did this, or I'm going to let you know during the week before our next session. I'm going to text you, I'm going to email you, and I'm going to say, hey, I just finished doing this. That way you have accountability, and that you're hitting your goals, and you have somebody to be, on your team and to cheerlead for you and to champion what you're up to, so you're not the only one doing it, so you don't necessarily lose steam. You don't need me as a coach to do that. You can have a family member do that. You can have a friend do that. You can have somebody at work do that for you. You can say, hey, you know what? I'm up to this big game, and I'm trying to achieve these goals, and I want to be able to let you know when I've achieved them. Is that okay? And most people will say, oh yeah, that's totally cool. I've never had somebody ask me that before. I'm really honored. So one thing you can do with a SMART goal is you can make yourself a table, and you can put specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time sensitive, and it says reasonable in my book, but I call it realistic. Of course you can be reasonable. You can reason yourself right out of doing your SMART goals, or you can be realistic and say, you know what, I'm a 7, I want to be a 10, I'm on my way to being a 10. So next is step 3, measure and plan against your values and missions. The next most important part of the productivity process is to measure your plan against your values and mission. Values are those qualities or elements which are most important to you and to have in your life. So for example, if you said, I value being on time, I'm always prompt, you have that for a reason. So your values align with your core beliefs and your essence for who you are. When you're operating based upon your values, you're more fully engaged in the task and role at hand. So imagine if you're being on time to find out, oh, how am I going to finance my business? Because you value being on time, you're going to want to do it more because you're already motivated by your values anyway, because they're already inherent to your core beliefs. So from a business sense, values are those principles which the company and the business unit holds most dear. or personally what you hold most dear. They're vital to the culture and how the company and its employees unite and interact with each other, your clients, and your community. So I'm going to stop right here with values on part two, and see you in part 3. See you then.